Welcome to the 26th episode of the Student Recap Podcast, Thoughtful Philosophy with Max. Now, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Max.
Yeah, so Max is like my friend since 6th grade, and we kind of shared the common thoughts about like politics, even though we don't like follow the same philosophies, but we do have very high interest in that sort of stuff. And like I just hang out with Max quite a bit. So to start off with, who is a philosopher that you would associate yourself most with?
I really like Albert Camus because I thought he was a very eccentric individual who led an interesting life.
Now, why do you think he led such an interesting life?
Well,
keep going.
Well, his philosophy really led like how he acted, and a lot of what he did was just live in the moment with little regard to the future or past. Like, I read somewhere, I'm not sure how true this is, that he would smoke like 4 cigarettes a day and then just like drive in his car really fast, which I find interesting because most philosophers stereotypically are like very intelligent people avoid risks.
They keep themselves cloistered away from society often. I would say that even though Greek philosophers were from a different time period, they did not go out of their house and go and do stuff. They just sat there and did philosophy. Now, Albert Camus, he grew up in Algeria, correct?
Yes.
And he moved to France. I think that part of the reason that he went to France was because there wasn't that intellectual advancement in Algeria that was possible for him, but in France it was, correct?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so why do you think that Camus resonates with you and other people in just in general?
Well, his philosophy was so much different from anything else I'd read because a lot of what I was reading was very theoretical stuff that was difficult to apply to modern living. Like I read The Art of War, which I thought was interesting, but since obviously I don't live in ancient China or anything, I couldn't really apply it to my own life.
Yeah, like The Art of War, it would be useful for military strategists, people who are oriented towards that, but it is not necessarily applicable in our real lives. But these 20th century, 19th century philosophers really do relate to us, since obviously past the Industrial Revolution, most of our lives have been more urbanized, and life is just more straightforward. You're not always wondering whether you're going to die from a natural cause, but you have more opportunities to do stuff in your life as well.
I also think that the urbanization factor has led to has contributed to the decline of traditional stoicism kinda, and more of I don't want to call it a TikTok brand of stoicism, but it's kind of what it is, I guess.
Yeah, so stoicism is what, keeping your emotions within?
Kinda. The ideology mostly follows, because at the time, it was ancient Rome, the life expectancy wasn't very much, so it's if you can affect something and it can affect you, then care about it, and if it doesn't affect you or you can't affect it, then it doesn't really matter much.
And also the propagation of our voices into mainstream news sources or media has also made people act on their intentions more, because with the urbanization, there's often a lot more philosophers that are going out and putting their ideas because they know that they can get an audience and that they can get power in the end, correct?
Yeah.
So, yeah, on that note, I believe philosophy, it's more divergent now than it ever has been due to the amount of different groups of people that would be accepting of those ideas. And there's all sorts of spectrums for philosophy, while in Greece and in Roman times, like you said, it was much smaller. It was just about human nature, what are we supposed to do on earth? But now there's governmental philosophy, social philosophy, personal philosophy, all that. Now, moving on from that, why should we look to other ideas instead of mainstream political thought?
I think that looking towards fringe ideas can provide new perspective, because if you're only seeing the same perspectives over and over again, like for example, mainstream political ideology, then you're going to kind of always get the same answers and have the same ideas. Whereas if you look at extreme ideologies, not that you have to follow them necessarily, but just looking at them can provide a new perspective on things, I suppose.
Yeah, the status quo, even though some systems should be maintained, there is a necessity for change over time because our world, it's ever changing. We shouldn't just keep the same system forever. And I'd actually like to reference Dune because it said something about democracies and revolutions, they always end in bureaucracy and aristocracy, which means when revolution overtakes the government and then a new order is established, eventually that new order will become the tyranny that very revolution fought to change. So there has to be always a moving front in ideas and social policies such that it's adequate for the people instead of just a universal policy that is set for centuries.
I agree. I don't think anything in life is especially stagnant at all. Mm-hmm. And there's no reason that politics shouldn't be the same way.
And I would actually like to talk about the state of America right now because with two political parties, let's say, there's other ones, but they're not relevant. There's not much freedom of expression for political ideologies other than if you don't want to have representatives, correct?
Yeah.
So there's a conglomeration of power in just two parties, when in reality there should be many more parties. For example, I would like to start a centrist party, but then also more alternative extreme groups could start a party as well. Now, in the future, do you see more divergence in political thought, or will it just stay the same, and will the systems in place keep it from expanding?
I think due to the internet, a lot of it, and like the accessibility of knowledge and ideas globally, because back when a lot of these ideologies are made, you couldn't like tell someone else across the globe, hey, I just invented this new idea. But now you can, so I feel like a lot of these ideas spread. That's why we have so many young extremists now. And I think as the internet keeps growing and we're more connected, I think more and more ideas will come to fruition, kind of.
Yeah, I definitely agree with the young extremists because, not to be racist or anything, but with the advent of terrorism, there's definitely been a lot more young minds involved in that rather than older people. So the extremism, it's more capable of getting into young people's mind because they're more adept to change, while the older generations, they stick to what they've thought for those decades. And basically, what I wanted to say is that since there's so many ideas and there's so many opportunities for people to like do what they want, extremism doesn't seem so extreme anymore. It's a desensitization. And like back to the terrorism example, it doesn't seem so extreme to them to do something for that cause because not only have they been indoctrinated, but they know that the systems in place haven't changed and they need to change, not that violence should be necessitated. Terrorism is obviously bad, but they know that there needs to be change in the system, which is a recognition that existentially there's nothing that's stagnant, like you said. What do you see America becoming in 10 years based on like how we're doing right now? Do you think it's going to become a better place, a worse place?
I think due to the sheer amount of ideas, and from what I've noticed, there's like an equal amount of opposing ideas. There's more extreme now. I think that it'll stay much the same, but maybe people will become even more divided due to the rise in extremism. And I feel like there's also the middle group kind of to where they see all these people caring so much about politics and stuff to where they just become indifferent. They're like, oh, well, everybody thinks different. Why should I care? So I think that indifferent party of people, like the apolitical, I guess is the word, I think that'll grow as well as the extremist groups. So it'll just be the kind of three camps again. Yeah,
there's in the recent election, there was definitely a massive group of people that were just like, I don't want either candidate to win, I'm just not going to vote. So they're definitely unincentivized to be part of the political system, but also because of the polarization, because they saw that the opposing groups, the left and the right, were going to extremes to fight each other, that they weren't actually doing real politics. They were doing drama, which isn't the point of democracy or any other form of government. The form of government is to provide for the people and to make sure the nation is better than it was before. And even though these populist groups or left-leaning, even socialist groups, have ideas for what we need to do to fix society, it has to be a collaborative effort between both groups, not just one person, one idea. Because I'd like to explain. So with the centrist party idea that I have, theoretically, you could establish a party that is made up of multiple individuals from different political and philosophical leanings that would then have a coalition to create legislation that is fair to the entire American people, or whether it be any other country, to that nation's people. So it's necessary to recognize that there's opposites and people don't agree with each other, but there's a point where we can compromise. And back to Albert Camus, would you like to explain his two main philosophies of existentialism and absurdism?
Well, existentialism, from how I've understood it through what I've read, which again, this interpretation might not be fully accurate. It's just like how I've interpreted it. It's kind of like no one's gonna really come to save you, so you have to make your own beliefs to try and keep yourself afloat.
Mm-hmm. Hell yeah.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that, especially for religion, because nobody straight up follows what the religion says. They always interpret it as a different thing for each person, because every person is different. And if you don't have the means to provide for yourself, you can't be independent from societal forces. Therefore, we all need to be independent.
Yeah.
And then with absurdism, it led to some of anarcho-syndicalism, correct?
I think so.
Yeah, so anarcho-syndicalism is basically like communist libertarian ideas that revolution must be instilled in order for like social order to be reestablished again, correct?
Yeah.
And it's, anarcho-syndicalism, it is much like the other fringe groups, that it only sticks to its base ideas and doesn't seek to compromise with other groups, I would say, just because they don't really try to compromise with others in order to have a less extreme idea. And I think that they would have to change that in order for them to get spots in representative roles in government. And are there any other philosophers that you would like to mention, or ones that you've read books of?
There we go.
Notable ones.
I read some books by Friedrich Nietzsche, but none of them really stuck with me the same way Camus' books did.
Mm-hmm.
And I read The Republic by Plato, but that was mostly just to get like a base understanding of philosophy.
I need to read that. I had it at one point, but I lost it. But back to Nietzsche. So one of his most important quotes, it's actually in our history classroom. It says, "The best way to corrupt the minds of the youth is to tell them what is right and tell them what is utmost wrong. So if they only know black and white, they cannot stray away from the ideas that you've given to them. There needs to be more multitudes of ideas and possibilities rather than this is just black and white, which I see the world becoming right now, as everything is one way or the other, much like how the Cold War was communism against democracy. It wasn't necessarily that. It was a bunch of economic forces, a bunch of social forces, a bunch of military forces that caused it to become a one argument thing."
That kind of relates to Nietzsche's book, Beyond Good and Evil, where he said that there's not really, or to be like someone who has there's no good or evil, there's just people with strong will and people with weak will. Mm-hmm. So he said that morality shouldn't be concrete, it should be kind of decide whatever you believe is moral.
Yeah.
Subjective morality.
amorality shouldn't be followed, but you need to have your own code that you determine based on pre-existing codes possibly, but also you don't have to follow the exact societal norms that are in place. There's a way for you to get out of that and to have your own expression without breaking laws or doing anything bad, because it betters yourself while not hurting others, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you for being on the podcast, and I apologize for all the background noises.